All right. So our first question is about the edition. And again, if you look at your score, you probably see that it says either revised or edited by one F. Campbell Watson. But that's not the first edition because I have a copy of the first edition. I don't remember how I got it or why I got it. And it does say in a little note, so I think it's a gift. And it says this rare first edition published in 1930 by New World Music. Is it different? You bet. And the problem was when it was first heard, there were indeed three saxophonists, but they were playing 8 different instruments. There are cuts, there are additions that go on to this piece. Uh, F. Campbell Watson had also done the concerto in F, and he was an editor. And a lot of stuff he did for this version we all use is actually the right thing. He made most of the appropriate changes and amendations. But there's also one more thing, which all of you should know. There is a recording made pretty much close to the time when it was premiered. The recording was made in Philadelphia by one Nathaniel Shilkret and the Victor Orchestra, RCA Victor. It turns out, I looked him up today, Shilkret was maybe the most recorded conductor in recording history. He was just all over the place. And it's worth it to listen to this first recording for a couple of reasons. One, what's different about it between the version we know, and what was the style of the time? It does raise an important question for all of us. Do we try to play this music the way it was played at the end of the 1920s, or do we move it forward? Do we move into the swing era or not? We're going to discuss that as we go along. It's fascinating to listen to this early version. And on the early version, by the way, the celeste part is played by Gershwin. What happened was Gershwin was in attendance at the sessions, and he and the conductor, as apparently Gershwin did with Paul Whiteman for Rhapsody in Blue, they got in a big fight. So the version you hear of Rhapsody in Blue on the recording with Gershwin playing, it says Paul Whiteman's orchestra, but it's not Paul Whiteman conducting. Whiteman walked out, didn't do it. So Gershwin was not easy to deal with, but he left, and all of a sudden, they realized they needed a celeste player. They brought Gershwin back in just to play that. And when you hear it on that recording, one, he adds stuff. It's an octave higher. It's all different than we would expect. It's a fascinating recording to listen to. And it does inform us a lot about the style of the time. Relatively small orchestral forces, mostly made up of the people in the Philadelphia Orchestra. In the year 2000, a man named Jack Gibbons went back, looked at the original parts, and concocted a score that was based on the first performance. And then, starting in 2013 at the University of Michigan, Mark Clegg started the Gershwin Initiative, where they're doing literally all the Gershwin music, everything Gershwin wrote, and making critical additions. So I've done the University of Michigan version, which reinstates a lot of things from here, minus the 8 different saxophones. But we'll talk about that too. And you can incorporate some of these things into the Watson version. So yes, the orchestration was very much of its time. And other than the saxophones, it's pretty traditional, with one instrumental exception, which we'll talk about in a second. In fact, we'll talk about it now. Taxi horns. So Gershwin comes back from Paris and he brings with him a set of 4 honk honk type horns. And that's what you hear on the first recording, those horns with those pitches. When you look in the score, you'll see them defined in parentheses or circles as A, B, C, and D. What we now know is these are not the notes necessarily, even though most recordings use those notes. All it does is say, here's the 4 different taxi horns, and do not repeat a pitch when the letter changes. Do we use the pitches that Gershwin has in the recording? The University of Michigan sort of argues, yes, those are the pitches. I don't think so. Because if the piece is played like it is now, just all the time, where are you going to get the pitches that existed? If you get it with the University of Michigan, those taxi horns actually come with the set of parts. with those pitches. But if you don't have them, I think Gershwin would be just as happy to use any notes that you have, as long as they are different. So that's my take on the taxi horns. Um, I'm reading a lot from book stuff because it helps here. If we open the score and we go to the first page, we see one, there's no instrumentation list. That's unfortunate because it would help us understand what instruments. How many percussionists do we need? Usually four. It's been done with three plus timpani. Four is better. Some orchestras have used five. So what you do here is you go through a score and you look and see where are the most instruments playing and how many players can do it. You can go to a percussionist, usually the principal of the section, and ask, can you pare this down? So it can be done with three, but you got to leave some stuff out. Four is the normal way these days. Something important for a piece written as late as it is, there are no metronome marks. Very surprising for a piece written at this point. And what makes that really interesting is when you start listening to all the performances on recording, you find that most conductors stay pretty much in the same tempo frame all the way, even when an indication doesn't necessarily tell you that it's a tempo. But we kind of all settle into that. Only maybe in the bluesy section is there a variance, but most of the time, with slight alterations up or down, it more or less stays in the same range. So let's start. A lot of things that are in the score, because of lack of rehearsal time, wherever it is, don't really get paid attention to. Little lines that could be brought out to make it more interesting, more vibrant. It's marked allegretto grazioso. Very nice. Perfect. Person is walking along in pairs. It's the walking music. So you decide how fast you think that is. Make sure you can hear the grace note clearly. So not so fast that it gets obscured. Already in the fifth bar, there's that nice little line in the clarinet, which should be brought out. He's marked the strings down from mezzo piano to piano, but maybe the clarinets need to come up to mezzo forte. So you're like that. The flute and bassoon usually come out fine. That's not a problem. With rehearsal one, sometimes we don't hear that run that goes up in the woodwinds in the fourth bar. That's kind of nice to hear. And you want your second and fourth horns to be strong in the third bar. So you have the imitation like that. Slight miscalculation on Gershwin and Kemble Watson's part comes 4 before 9. It's you have to have your solo second violin and viola start just a little bit louder, so it's clear that it's related to what the flutes and bassoon do at the beginning. Otherwise, it's lost. Rehearsal 2. Nice to be able to hear the viola and the clarinet. You need equal balance, of course, between the people going all four have to sound like a connect. And look where that accent is. Most of the time, what you hear is and that's not what he wrote. Yeah, even my recordings, I didn't ignore it. These next performances, that will be corrected, I think. Vigoroso at figure 3. Vigoroso is not a tempo. And so we don't change tempo here. We just play nice and strong. And one thing I think that's stylistically correct, if you look at the brass right at figure 3, there's an accent on the first note, but really isn't the feeling going to the second note. At least that's what I do. So I do a little accent and then I crescendo into the 8th note that the brass had. And same thing 4 bars later, going into the downbeat of this bar. It seems like stylistically that's the right thing to do. The next marking also not a tempo. Giocoso just means humorous. Also not a tempo. Giocoso just means humorous. And what did I write here? The, it's about the taxi horns. Of course, it must have been shocking at the time. Uh, we already had typewriters in Satie's Parade, a few things like that. But this audience that heard this for the first time must have been really stunned by the taxi horn. And yeah, it's meant to provoke some giggles and laughs, and that's perfectly fine. Um, Measure four, we get a new instrument added to the proceedings. That's the xylophone, who has a huge role in this piece. Uh, and you always want to make sure it's played with hard mallets, heard nice and strong. And even though it's doubled in the flute, it's really the xylophone color that will be the one that dominates. Although I also try to bring out the oboes, dum, ba-da, da-da, with a little accent, so that that figure is heard, especially the second oboe. Quite nice. Uh, Number five, this is a difference in the fourth bar, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This original version, you see that line in the bassoons and cellos? That was not in the original at all. There was no, it just changed chord. So Campbell Watson, I think, here is perfectly correct. And I do it by having a crescendo right before they're on da, da, da. So you really hear it very clearly. I think it's quite effective. Um, Six is more or less repeated what happens. And then at number seven afterwards in the fifth bar, this marking of vivo is an addition by Campbell Watson. And I think it's probably right. We usually take a just a little bit quicker tempo, but not so fast because there's a lot of notes to get in after eight. 1, 2, 3, 4 in the fifth bar of eight. So you have to take into consideration it's high up, really high up. And if the tempo is too fast, it's a mess. It's difficult for intonation anyway, but make sure your tempo is just a little bit vivo, not too much, slightly moving. That'll be enough. Just before number, no, after eight, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in the seventh bar, make sure everybody but the bass clarinet plays as short as possible so the bass clarinet can be heard. All four notes. And instead of retard, most of us usually do it as a menomoso. Could be a molto menomoso, whatever. Something like that. Otherwise, it's obscured and you don't hear the notes. Trombones and oh, I have to go back. Sorry. Oh yeah, trombones at number eight. Forte, but look at the lines. Those are not short notes. Ba, 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 ba. Only people playing that syncopation. So you want to bring them out, let them play the notes as indicated. It's actually quite nice. So the bass clarinet holds on to the note. You sit there on the fermata. You set your opening tempo at your walking music. For the second oboe, all the same tempo. I suppose most of you with this edition have that 2/8 bar before figure 9 and it says retard. The retard is not in the original. In fact, I don't know if I've ever heard anybody do this retard. It seems kind of silly. But yeah, it just doesn't seem like it's a logical thing. So most of us just make it a 3/4 bar or 1, 2, 1, 1. Stay in the same tempo. Symbol at the odd tempo. Oh yeah, before number 9. It says with hard sticks. And this is something for you to have a discussion with the percussionist. What kind of sticks constitute hard sticks and where on the instrument do they play? Do they play near the edge? Do they play near the bell? It's always a different kind of sound. And it's helpful to get to know all the varieties. Cymbal is a really interesting instrument in this piece. There's a place coming later I'll tell you about this. It's kind of cute. It's a trick a cymbal player can do. But this has to be a fast roll. You can't hear beats. So it has to be like that. Probably snare drumsticks is what most of them will use, although I've seen it done with just small, thin wooden sticks that don't have a point to them. I've seen it done that way before. Now, the next grazioso at number 9 applies to the moving lines and the clarinets. Again, want to bring that out a little bit. By now, everybody knows the tune, even people who've never heard this piece before. This early, they know the tune. Don't need to have so much emphasis on it. Woodblock. It's another instrument where there's a variety of sticks you can use and a variety of wood blocks. You know, they can be pitched, they can range from low to high. You kind of want them to be somewhere not too low here. High one probably played with wooden sticks like snare drum sticks, gives you the right sound. What is this? 2 measures before 10. Yeah, this comes up a lot in every piece. The violins need time to go from a sustained note to a pizzicato, don't they? You can't just go da plonk. Maybe you can do it, but it doesn't work. So you have to decide how long a breath you need before they do the pizzicato. It's almost a quarter note here at this tempo. So da off, yap, ba, 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 in order to be heard clearly and for the rhythm to be clear. So just always be aware as you study your scores, where do instruments need time to get from arco to pizzicato when it appears it's not possible. Happens a lot in cellos and basses with many pieces. It's a nice little interplay here in the woodwinds that doesn't get heard very often at 10. The oboes who have the 32nd notes, it's kind of nice to bring it out. I can tell you from experience, 4 before 11, that's correct. It says the first 2 stands only. When you read this piece with an orchestra for the first time, half the section will not be ready to play the tutti 2 before 11. All of a sudden, they either don't see it or they just don't get their instruments ready in time. They have to be ready right from the point when the solo instruments play to come in. But the entrance can't be strong. It's part of the general buildup here. So not too much as it goes along. Okay. I wrote, there's also a mistake in some sets of the material that places the first violin's tutti marking 3 before 11. I've seen that in some editions. I don't know why some of the parts are that way, but just a regular area. And look at the cello part 4 before 11, because the way it's indicated can be confusing with the divisi and who's playing what notes. So make sure you decide who's going to play which notes and which notes there are. Again, in the score, because of the way notation is, it's hard to tell. You have to kind of figure it out. So take a look at that. At number 11, it's rather nice to make sure the trombone's grace note is heard. Bum 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 bum. It's almost like a little surprise. It's an Italian tune called La Sorella, and must have been very popular in Paris for Gershwin to bring it. One of the only quotes he ever has. When we get to 12, many of us actually slow down a little bit right here instead of where the retard is written. You don't have to do it. I do it just for the clarity of being able to hear the horns and violas. The violas have to play really loud. Now, con umore a tempo, with humor but in tempo. We've got to get that trombone gliss in, that kind of first really dirty moment. He's like a somewhat, what's the word I'm looking for here? A not svelte person walking. That's what this is. Is that okay if I not offended somebody here with that term? I don't know what else to say. It really is a very heavy sound. So the gliss can start before, of course.
We're almost in Oktoberfest, so that helped.
Yeah, well, overfed, that's another way. So many of us, myself included, actually go a little bit under tempo. But we have to get the tempo back someplace. You can either do it 2 before 13 or right at 13, but you got to get back to tempo. The closed notes at 13, there's a big difference between consordino and closed. Consordino is with a device that gets put in the instrument. Closed is stopped with the hand. And that not only changes the sound, it changes the pitch a little bit. So don't be surprised, but it's a definite indication on Gershwin's part to have it as a closed hand in the bell type sound. Very important. 3 before 15. Why do I have that in here? Oh, yeah. So it's kind of unplayable at the end. You see that high A, 3 before 15 in the violins, pizzicato, and then they have to get down to the D, which could be done and should be on an open string. But it going back and forth here is not so easy. So how do we do it? In the first bar of pizzicato, that's easy because they can do the A and the E with the left hand. So they can do that. But getting back, not so easy. The high A makes it impossible to get back, but it's inaudible. You don't hear it up there. So there's actually one little trick. You can either have half the section play the top two pizzicatos. Some people leave out the high A altogether, just so you can get to the arco clearly, because it has to be that way. Positioning of the percussion on the staff can be confusing. Look at the second line. Is that the taxi horn line? Yeah, the taxi horn cannot get to the cymbal in time. So the percussionists have to figure out how to divide up all these parts. And you can help there where, you can't go up, 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 bum, bum, bum. And by the way, there's another trick with the taxi horns. It's kind of fun if you have this room on stage. You put two taxi horns on one side, extreme left, and the other on the right. So they're actually ants when they're sitting next to each other, or one player is doing it. It's nice for the sound, but there's a visual as well as an audio effect if they can be separated just a bit. But it requires some real logistics to be able to figure out where they go and how they do it. And some halls it's not possible. The timpani might be in the middle and you can't get over. But separating a bit is always a good idea. The manuscript of the University of Michigan scores has different notes for their first and second bars in the fourth of 15. Is that right? Yeah. Now, I don't know how you do it, but maybe if you wrote to Mark Clegg at the university and asked for a perusal score, perhaps they would send it to you so you can see the comparisons. Or just, it's the same thing like in Mahler 1, for example. We all have a Mahler 1 score, but it's going to cost you whatever the Universal latest edition is, say $150. So what we all do is we ask for a perusal score, and then we put the places we want back in our old score. It's cheating, but we all do it. This is probably going to be the same kind of thing. Cut this part out of the edited video, because Mark is really going to give you a bad time.
I'll take care of that.
Yeah. The entrance of the trumpets, yes. This is before 16. It's incredibly clever on Gershwin's part. So you see when the trumpets came in at 15, they're only mezzo forte, although there's an accent. And you want the crescendo to go all the way to the end of that sustained note. So the trumpets wind up dominating everything at the end. It's really good, really works. A lot of trumpets, if you don't say something about it, they won't do it. They just will not let it get high enough. It's nice that that trumpet note kind of soars above as the phrase ends. 16, in the fourth bar, nice viola line. Obviously, they shouldn't play 2 bars in one bow. I actually do 4 notes per bar, so they can all be heard. It's a nice chromatic moving line. It's worth bringing out. Okay, something very picky. 17, the triplet figure for the low horns. I never hear it. Look at the horn parts. Da 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 da. Maybe someday somebody will maybe divide the cellos into 3 parts and add that low horn thing in to help amplify it. But I may try to get it. I sort of never really noticed it before. Um, Here's a big difference, I think, before 19. Bum, 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 ba, yum, bum, bum, ba, yum, bum, bum, ba, yum, bum, bum, ba. Diminuendo and piano on the last note. I just don't think that works. I've tried it because the taxi horns, you can't control the volume. So those three notes are going to be loud no matter what you do. And he doesn't have a diminuendo. He's only got piano and the horns in the last note. But it sounds funny, doesn't it? No. So I just take the whole thing and leave it at forte. But then I take a brief pause to let the sound clear before I start the next section. So I'm ya ta 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 ya ta 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 ya ta 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 ya ta 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 ya da da. Just a little. I can't give you a note value or length, just something, so the sound clears and the new harmony is present, and they can play nice and gently. This is a total change of tempo. You have to pay attention to the syncopated violas before 20. Violins making a crescendo harmonic, not easy, but try to get as much as you can. New tempo, do not make it a cello rondo into 20. But the subare onomato is back to the walking tempo. So it's kind of the same all the way through. Lots of little lines to look at. I don't need to go into all of those with you. Yeah. Kevin Watson. Oh, no, that's not that. But 2 before 20, we talked about that. 21. Now it's another line that gets lost. The flutes at 21. I guess just ask them to play as strongly as they can so you have a chance to hear that. It's a riff on the xylophone. It's a riff on that. It's nice if you can hear it, but it doesn't usually come out. 22, you need to bring out low strings and the third trombone. That's the main line there. Con fuoco is not a tempo, it's just a feeling with fury. So don't go faster. And do not slow down before the ritenuto before 23. Right in time. Yum, ta 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 tam, ba. And like the bass clarinet, it's kind of better to do this as a menemoso rather than the retard, because seems too hurried. Let the horns take time after the first eighth. Yum, ba, 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 bum, ba. And I even put a tiny, very tiny space after that last eighth note. Yum, da, 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 dum, da, and settle into the long note. And it's nice. The strings entrance at 23 in the winds, you can blend that with the horn if you wish, or you can take a little pause. Either way, doesn't matter so much. Look at 23 at the English horn part, and you see 2-bar crescendo, 2-bar diminuendo, sort of. I don't understand why he didn't do the same for the oboe at 24. So I do it. A little bit up, a little bit down. Here's a nice one for you. You ready? Slatkinism, but you can steal it. After 24, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. After the 3, 4, have the cellos do a portamento between the C and the downbeat G of the 5/4. Da 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 ya da da. But the top note, you do it, you don't hit it loud. You do it almost with a little diminuendo on the top. It's a nice sound. It's an affectation, I would say. At 26, so why did he ask for just 4 basses? Probably maybe all he had at the time. That's one. 2, he thought it would sound too heavy with 8 or so playing it. And maybe he thought too many players would blur the pitches. But these days, we usually have the whole section play it, and it usually sounds just fine. Now, in the first recording, and in the University of Michigan edition, they take out the 8 bars between 26 and 27. They're gone. Strange. Could have been because the recording time couldn't allow it, but in any event, it doesn't really work because, oh, sorry, yeah, between 27 and 28. Is that, no, wait a minute, what am I doing here? Is it the 8 bars, 26, 7? Oh, yes, I see, the violas and the cellos, they don't have time to take the mutes off. So if you, in other words, if you went right from that fourth bar of 25 directly, is that right? Yeah, if you went from that to 27, there's no way you could do it with the mute change. That's what it is. The mutes are on at 25 and they're off at 27. So by omitting those bars in between, you have no time to make the mute change. So I don't quite understand that. Okay, some stuff here we don't need to talk about. 29 is kind of the same as the walking tempo. And you
Leonard,
can take,
can I
yeah,
interrupt you just for a moment?
yeah,
In the Tranquillo of 28, here's
yeah.
a very curious moment that I've experienced with the piece. And you mentioned something about the stylistic interpretation. Do you swing? Do you not swing? How far would you go to allow your winds or later your solo violin in these
Yeah.
passages to actually swing it?
Yeah, in this one, I personally don't think it's the. I think it has to be simple. So
Okay.
I just da da. Yeah, but you can take breaths da 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 da, and then beside the 3 against the 2. But to do da da ya da ya da da, just yeah, I not for me. Um, Big retard before 29. Um, at 30, you'll all see this. The violins have the forte piano, crescendo 2 bars and back. Do the same thing for the other instruments that have the long note. Trombone, trumpet, horn. Just so everybody does the same thing. And it also allows you a chance to be able to hear that yum bum 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 that's going on. Strangely enough, he marks it properly at 31, just leaves it out for that. 32. Fairly clear. Vigoroso at 34, again, not a tempo change, just a sound. Not a problem for the pizzicato because of the 8th rest. You can get to the pizzicato from, well, it's hard, but it can be done. I just want to move ahead because we've got a lot to talk about. 37, clear, rehearse the violins slowly to get that. Yeah, 38. So let's look carefully. Horn, trombone, dum, da 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 da, trumpet, dum, da 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 da, with an extra note, dum, da 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 da. See it? 1/16 more than the others. And then you really have to encourage the 3rd trumpet to play equally as loud as everybody else has. So it's a 3-bar echo that goes on. Very important if you can do it. Then we get this flurry of sound and slash marks before 40, which is just a pause. 1, 2, 1, wait. Più moderato, subito scherzando. Scherzando, not a tempo, but the moderato is. And sometimes you can let the English horn player, it says rubato, not quite sure what he really intends here, but the player can go, they can play with it if you want. Or it can be straightforward, can also work. Okay, here's a place I hate. And there's not much you can do. It's the bar before 41. This run that the bassoon has to pick up. I don't know why he just put it in one bassoon. He's got your flutes doubling and brings in the oboe. I often wonder if it wouldn't be better to have 2 bassoons on this and have them actually start on the downbeat of the bar before 41, as opposed to coming in suddenly loud. So it feels more like a connection. I might try it once. I've never done it, but I'm thinking about it. So you can see why. And make them play loud enough so you always hear it. 41 is a strange dynamic, isn't it, for the violins, mezzo forte. And yet it's fortissimo for the trumpets. I don't quite know why he doesn't want the violins brought out there, but kind of worth considering bringing out just so it's all there. Try to hear as much as possible. Your tempo is difficult here because of what happens before 42, 5 bars, the trombones. It's not so easy to go, is it, at a quick tempo. So I actually make a little retard starting there. So bum ba-dum 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 bum ba, and this take the retard all the way to 42. And you want your bass clarinet to be playing nice and strongly for that whole thing before 42. Nice connection between the regular clarinet and the viols. Yada da 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 da. The violin solo, Poco Rubato. Now, this is supposed to represent the woman under the, or man under the street lamp, just going, hey, sailor, come here. You know, she's trying to entice him. So, I do a harmonic, by the way, on the A in the second bar on the last note, just to, and just sustain it. You don't have to worry about conducting it because it's a free bar for all the other instruments. Just indicate to the orchestra where the down beats are. English horn. That's the guy walking, just I'm not so sure. And then we get this Stravinsky moment at 43 with those chords. Fascinating, isn't it? It's hard because of the pizzicato. Off. And we've talked about this. The violins have to get from arco and viols arco to that pizzicato. So they kind of have to come off on the downbeat. Your downbeat can be in this new tempo, which is a bit faster. Da 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 ya da 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 one. Bum bum bum. So you use your first beat to take everybody off and creates a silence, yes, but you need it in order to get the pizzicato together, and it'll sound silly if the other instruments also don't cut off. Nice accent in the fourth bar at 43. And then the violin does this. I have the second one usually play a little louder. Says, hey, come on, get over here. Doesn't do it. Then the viola becomes the patron. Da 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 da. Little time. And the horn also a little time. Yum ba 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 bum bum. Sorry, yum da 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 dum bum. Should the celeste be arpeggiated or should it be not arpeggiated? Gershwin seems to break them up when he's playing, but we know the circumstances under which it was recorded. I have the one at 44 played just as one chord, and then I arpeggiate the 1-3 after 44. It does say con licenza. So, John, you're absolutely right. It could be played in a less straightforward way, but for me, it's more about taking breaths between the groups of
more
three.
phrasing.
And believe it or not, your attention as a conductor needs to be focused on the bassoon, who's often late here. Okay, now we start almost with the stylistic thing. After 45, the trombone, rubato. I not only have it rubato, I go yum, pa, 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 pa. I do a little grace note between the C and the F, dum, pa, 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 pa. Then I wait and then land on the E flat, dum, pa, 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 pa. Because the beauty of this passage is we don't know what note he's going to wind up on. It's really wonderful.
Can I ask you about the celeste at 45? Is that arpeggiated or is that straight?
No, it has to be straight. Oh, wait a minute. What did I write? I better stick with what I wrote. Hold on. I may be wrong about that. Hold on. 45. Where am I? No, I didn't write anything about it. Okay. do what you wish. Okay. Um, No, I think because of the second violin and bass entrance coming in the way they do, it's better to do it as non-arpeggiato. Okay, Andante. Before we talk about even the tempo, let's talk about the bassoon. If a bassoon could do it, this would be a grace note. Like a trombone. But bassoon, actually, I've heard some bassoons try to do it, but they can get close. So I think it has to be really uh, down and dirty. Not like that. Is this a blues? And there are several different meanings to the word blues. One, it's a feeling. I got the blues. Two, it's a formal musical structure. A blues is, 1, 5, 1, 4, 5, 1. 8 parts. Sometimes 4, sometimes 16. So this is not a formal musical blues. It doesn't follow the harmonic pattern of blues music at all. It's a blues because of the feeling. And there's a big difference between this kind of style that was heard at the end of the 20s, just as we were um, having the prohibition times and all that. It's illegal music. And what would then become swing, which comes a little bit later in the 30s. So here, I think your accompaniment in the orchestra, leaving aside the drum, is very straightforward. You can't do anything here at all. But the drum can. And he says, wire brush. And there are lots of ways to do this. You can play it exactly as it's written. Cha, 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 cha. But I think the drum can also go cha, 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 cha. And it's not out of place. But the way it's done is, the wires on the brush can be tightened or loosened. So what I do is the left hand, or depending on the orientation of the drummer, hits the downbeat, and then the other 3 notes are swiped like that. And I think even though the early recordings suggest they didn't do it that way, here, because nobody else is playing it and it's solistic, there is something to be said for doing it in the drum only here. Now we come to the entrance of the trumpet and the saxons. It says with a felt crown. The felt crown is, you'll often see trumpet players take what would be a beret that you wear, French hat, and put that over to create a kind of darker sound. Also can be done open. I've even heard somebody do it off stage. I didn't like it, but they did it. As we'll see what's coming up, find out what the trumpet player does when you read it through. Don't say anything until you hear what they do, and then decide how you want this to go. Now, it's a solo, so there's a certain amount of flexibility you have to have as a conductor. So some trumpet players might put too many inflections take away the beauty of the piece, and they become affects. So for me, I try to keep it a little bit on the simple side. I wouldn't do a little slide into the first note. I would do it from the written C to the E flat in the second bar. I think that's appropriate if it's very gentle. Now, about the saxes. 1, where do they sit? They can either usually be to the right of the clarinets or to the left of the bassoons. Either way works. I kind of like them over near where the percussion is. It seems to be the logical place, but it doesn't matter. So here's another, I'm not going to call it Slatkinism, but I'm going to tell you about it. Even though it says pianissimo, the sound of the saxes is something new in the piece. So you do want to hear it. Maybe pianissimo, but it's saxes, so there's limited pianissimo. You do want to hear them. I do the first 2 bars exactly as it's written. But in the third bar, This will not mean anything to the majority of you who are watching this. And a little bit like what I often do, I tell everybody you have to think of an image of Fred Astaire when you're doing this whole piece. And I realize that there are many of you who don't know who Fred Astaire was. So I tell everybody, go watch him. Go see him on YouTube. And then you'll understand this, this degree of elegance that has to fall into the piece. And here, in the third bar, when the saxes come in, I do a little gliss for all three saxes between the two notes, but it's a specific kind of gliss. I refer to it as a Billy May gliss. If you didn't know Astaire, you really don't know Billy May. Billy May was an arranger, one of the great arrangers of all time. He had a signature sound. It's a gliss that's done not with the keys, but with the lips. So you're doing it pretty close to the notes there. Da. It's slow. It only takes place over maybe 2 or 3 chromatic notes, and he never quite hit the top note in tune, just a little bit under. It is so cool. But you gotta go listen to Billy May arrangements, hear what the saxes do, see if you think it works for you. It's a very, but you only do it one time. That's all. It's the only time it happens. The trumpet will be free at the poco rubato. Da da ya da da ya, click, da da. So your job is to just deal with the accompaniment, make sure it's together. But the only way you can do that is to hear what the trumpet player does the first time. Yeah, your job is to follow and place the pizzicatos. That's what I've written. Everything should be played espressivo. When we get to, oh, sorry, I need to talk about 2 before 48. You need to have time for everybody to stop the 4 before, 3 before. Da, 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 ya, da, ya. 1. Good click on 1 where the 8th rest is, but I can tell you from experience that the solo second, viola and cello, once the violin starts, they have no idea what's going on. So you have to rehearse 1 time without the solo violin just to get da-dum, 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 da-dum. Then add the violin, make sure your 3 other players are in communication with each other. The solo violin will be able to fit that in comfortably. And you take a little bit of time just before 48. What do we do about the quintuplet in the clarinet as the pickup to 48? There's a couple ways to do it. You can exaggerate it, but certainly a retard is necessary unless you do what I do. I just have it as an additional note of 16th in the tempo. Da 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 da. Just like that. So I don't try to do anything other than just have a figure of 9 notes to go up. That's what I do for that. Very espressivo at 48. Feel free to do what you want with the dynamics. Certainly want a little you just want to add crescendos, diminuendos. Nice subito piano, 2 before 49. Nice syncopation, 3 before 49. There's lots of stuff going on here. And so you just really look at this section and see how you want things to go. There's a printed gliss in the violins in the 3rd of 49. Da 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 ya. Da da ya da ya da. And you might want to add more glissandos. Not too many. There's just a few along the way. I think another nice thing to do is to make a diminuendo going into 50. So maybe on the last 3/8 notes worth of diminuendo and a retarded, yeah. Da ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da bum ba. And pay attention to your bass and cello for the pizzicato. There's going to be a tendency for them to want to rush and play too fast here. So you have to be careful about that. 4 before 51, you just kind of move ahead. Oh, wait. Yes, 4 before 51, the original, there was no C sharp in the tune. It's just da 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 da. So Campbell Watson added the C sharp, probably correct. It makes sense. And you do it as a gliss. That way. Keep the tempo flowing. Going into 50, Oh, sorry, before that, you need to start after 52. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 bars, 5 bars. Now we start to get some interesting accents, don't we? Da ya da 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 ba da ya da da bam ba da ya da da ba ba ba. Start paying attention to those accents. They're going to be really important in a few bars. Um, After 53, 1, 2 in the third bar. Notice the indication for the cellos. 2 beats legato, 2 beats slurred, but with dots. Da ya da 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 ya ba 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 ba. Keep the bowing, but slightly separate the notes. There's your accents again in the horn. Da 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 ba 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 ya da da ba ba ba. That's very stylistic, very much of the time. And now the accents get fast and furious before the grandioso, don't they? Ya ta 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 ta. Da, 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 da. As much contrast as you can for these accents. Very important. Complete cutoff. Think about your tempo before you start the grandioso. Grandioso may or may not be a tempo indication, but we usually do this a bit slower. Da, 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 ya, da, 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 da. But while you conduct it, what you're really doing is thinking of da ya da ba ba da ya da ba ba da ya da 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 da. That accent. That's what gives you your tempo to be able to have it. The retard, 2 bar retard going into 55. You start the retard where it's written, go into 8 somewhere the bar before 55. I think I go da ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da ba ba. And I give the last 2/16ths because those are going to become the quarters of the tempo at 55. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Bum 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 bum. I do it like that. Not too fast for this out tempo. And another nice effect to do, not written, but sort of implied, 2 before 56 with the cymbal and the bass drum. Start them maybe mezzo forte, and each time they play a note, make each one louder. So the culmination is at 56. And at 56, all right, it's an eighth note, but nobody plays this note short in the cymbals. No one. It's always ringing, and you let it clash. So you're getting to that point. We slow down. The colmato, the violin can be a little free, not too much, or else the rhythm goes away. Strings have to be really soft. Clarinet and flute tend to sound late, so make sure you pay attention to them. Another little problem before 57, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The bassoons as written. The question is that a slur or just an indication for a triplet? I'm going to move forward because we're running long here and I want some questions. The bassoons play over what's called a break, meaning in order to finger this, there's you can't really play it the way it's written if you think of it as a slur. You cannot go ba ya da da. It just doesn't work because there's a collision between the way the fingering works. So there are 2 options. I've heard people play it short, ba, 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 ba. That can work. I find though that I slurred 2 and 2, da ya ba da, and that works. So those are your options, but just know that if you think of it as a slur over the whole group, not going to happen. The horns often will not play that triplet in the right place. They'll play like almost even 16ths or even 8ths. Da, 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 ba, 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 ba. We hear a lot of horn players play that on the 4th beat. So I subdivided 1, da, 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 1, ya, ba, 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 and slow it down a little bit. So I actually give them this subdivision at the end, both times. The clarinets can do something nice. 3 before 57, da, 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 do a little, that lip bliss again into the 3rd beat, hitting the top note just a little flat, just a little bit. You don't have to do that. And now comes the biggest controversy of all. How do we do 57? And I've gone back and forth on this. I can't tell you how many times. Do we day? Da 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 ba ba da yeah. Do we play it that way or do we da 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 ba ba? Recently, I've gone more to that swing rhythm, but I'm changed my mind again now that I've really spent a lot of time researching. And I think we will put that thing in the accompaniment. Da 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 da. They can do it. Violas, saxes, the drum. But I think I wound up asking 7 former and current principal trumpets with orchestras. I said, if the conductor shows up, you get to this place, they don't say anything in advance, what's your default? Do you go to a swing style or do you play it straight? And they almost all said, we'll play it straight unless we're told otherwise. And it makes some sense because the style, and I'm the last person ever to conform to historical performance practice. That's a subject for a very long lecture. Or as Neville Mariner used to say, if Bach had a modern toilet, he would have used it. Anyway, uh, I think there's something now about playing more, especially when the strings get it, the low strings. It's awkward if they try to do it in a swing style. But the other question is the pickup note to the allegro a long note or a short note? We all make a retard. Bum, 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 bum. I think I'm going to keep that first note long. Start soft, do a crescendo, and then what's going to happen now? I think I'll probably do it that way, at least next week. And then when I do it in a couple of weeks, and when am I doing it? I'm doing it in Poland. I'm doing it with in Katowice. That'll be interesting. Okay, so for me now, the tune straightforward, the accompaniment figures with a swing. Da 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 da. So that's my kind of compromise way. The other thing about it is when you look at 2 before 58, yes, the trombones can do a swing style air, but it just doesn't sound right. They have to connect with the trumpets. And then the flutes get it with the low cello and bass, and that just doesn't sound right in a swing style at all. So don't do it that way. After 58 in the third bar, again, keep the violin straightforward, what I'm going to do, and then this lower string, that feels about right for today's way of thinking about it. 59 is fairly straightforward. Clarinet has to come out, obviously. 60 will be the same thing. Trumpet plays straightforward. The strings go with the swing. And never tell them something like, it's played like a triplet with the middle beat being a rest. Don't say that. Just sing it to them a few times so they feel it. It's a little bit like when you have to do a Strauss waltz. We all know what it's supposed to sound like. But if we try to describe it in technical terms, it doesn't work. We rush the first beat a little bit. We know what to do. It just, we shouldn't put it into words. 61 is one of the glorious places in this piece. It's just so fabulous. And you want to bring out those saxes, but especially bring out the second oboe in the English horn. Da 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 da. Straightforward. It's just so wonderful. Exaggerate this to the hilt with the glissandos. Da 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 da. Yeah, another slide going up. By the way, the bowing, it doesn't indicate bowings very often, but there is an interesting one here after 61. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in the ninth bar. Yep, it works. It's a good bowing. But I can tell you that the bar before 62, 62 itself has to be on an up bow. And you're coming off a down, and you go, well, it's perfectly fine, but it's a short note. And often they'll go, yep, They have to get, that's played in the middle of the bow. They have to get to the tip in the air and then start 62 near the tip to make that work. So often this is a place you have to rehearse to get it. And it's like a quick retake to get to the tip and go up. It's not easy. It just isn't. This retard before 63 is not in the original. And it's retarded. I never understood, so I don't do it. Just leave it at it. And here we are. Whole band is going. It's kind of nice to look over at the basses at 63, and if you watch them all kind of just doing a nice exaggerated right hand pizzicato. It's kind of fun. After 63, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, ninth bar, it's you need to hear the trombones and the lower basses for that chromatic. Pa, 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 pa. That's important. Just to bring them out just a little bit. Huge cymbal crash, let it ring right after that. And now the next part, just you have to just be absolutely like a metro. Pa, 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 da, 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 pa, 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 pa. And before 64, as clear as possible. It's just with the accent. Pa, pa, da, 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 da. Yes, he could have written it as a three. Pa, 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 pa. He could have done that, but he didn't. It's all in four, and you're playing everything against the beat. Straightforward. People will get lost here first time around and second time. The 465, 3 bars. Look at that phrasing in the violins. Slur and a dot. So what does it mean? It's a bowing, and it's not legato. And often, because half the recordings you're gonna hear da-dum, ba-dum, ba-da. They're gonna take the slur as meaning a bowing, and it's not. It's ba 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 ba. And like we've done many times in the piece, this is better starting a little bit slow. Get your retard to go dum ba dum ba da 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Just make the retard all the way, expand your beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Ba-da, da-da, ba-da. Nice and majestic and slow. The indication for the timpani is correct. It's dead center of the drum on both instruments, so there's no pitch. Very important. The largo, yeah, it can be sudden. Da-dum, ba-dum, bum, ba-da-da, ya-da-da-da, ya. And the trombones, listen to me. Yum, da-da-da-da-da, ya. Glissando from the E to the B flat. A really nasty one. It's really good. Things slow down. I'd subdivide a little bit before 67 just to get the retard. Things calm down. This is kind of interesting. I do advise you to go listen to that early recording, Nathaniel Schulkret. This guy was really interesting. And you'll hear a lot of things that are not even in this version. It's like the instruments couldn't play it or something. But here at 67, where is it? Come on, Slatkin. That's a little hard to understand a tempo here. We don't know which tempo he's referring to, of course. Schulkret in this first recording plays this section relatively calm. But the interesting thing is it's not a tuba in the recording. It's a bass clarinet. Don't know why. And then it says we hear the bass clarinet playing a different note to start, an actual wrong note, and not playing espressivo. It's very straightforward. And the strings in the recording stop 3 beats early, and the seconds don't play the E natural before 68. It's absolutely fascinating. We got this little interlude at 68, opening tempo. Then we get to the adagio. I do this, and I have the bass kind of do a little crescendo to get us back to the moderato. What is this, about 70? Oh, in the early recording, there's no upbeat in the violins going into 70. It just starts right on 70. You might need to start moving your tempo along here a little bit. Hard to know. Not so easy to get the violins to do the accent after 70. Try for it. It kind of gets lost in the shuffle, but it's there and it's nice to bring out. it builds, it's clear. 74, keep moving. Bring out timpani, hard sticks at 74. Stay at single forte at 75. Now comes to me what was the most interesting discovery from that first recording in the University of Michigan entry, 76. In a way, I almost don't want to tell you because I want you to listen to it. No, I need to tell you, I guess. No timpani roll at 76. None. It just stops. So I did it in Detroit. Obviously, we're near the University of Michigan. So I did it. I did this version, and I sort of liked it. Most people expect it there, and we kind of have to think of if we want to do it or if we don't want to do it. But if you do it, my suggestion for the timpanis: do not have the timpani make the crescendo until the strings have started to run. Otherwise, you don't hear the beginning of it. And in the original version, the blue volume, that run takes place over 2 beats. So it's that makes kind of sense when you think about all those notes. We have to do it slow. Timpani roll, 3. It's a lot of notes to get into 1 beat. So there's something to be said for subdividing this, and then be suddenly slower at the grandioso. That'll be up to you. 77, presto is we haven't seen this marking anywhere in the piece, and it's very hard for the oboes particularly to do that. So you have to find a logical tempo, which is more like even I can't do it when I'm not a woodwind player. It tends to get behind in the woodwinds and ahead in the pizzicato. So you need to do it do it with the woodwinds first, then do it with the strings alone, and then put them together and explain who's listening to who. There's this pause, and there is no pause, by the way, on the first recording at the Largo. It's bam bam. It's right away, but the pause is good. But if you listen to that early recording, you'll see it's very abrupt. And the last chord of the Largo, bum 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 bum, there needs to be a tenuto or fermato, just a little bit of time, and then a cutoff before you start the piumoso. And I'm not sure about this piumoso. What did I write? Hold on. It's unclear why he did that. Yeah, as the concluding device for the piece, it just doesn't feel right to go faster here. The original version for the last 5 hours double the first 2 saxes. Smart idea. Have the second sax play the first does. Keep everybody soft, other than those playing da da da, and then your Billy Magless da 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 da. And then what? So my father, who was a conductor, he recorded this piece, and you know what he did, which I guess people did. Da, 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 ya, da, 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 da. He resolved it to the F. But as you see in the score, it's da 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 da. Dad, I don't think so. I think it should stay like it's written, but I understand why. Do not do the crescendo until after this tune is finished. Da, 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 ya, da, da, da. Then you give the crescendo, conduct it out. You don't have to, but notice that the snare drum plays a kind of roll 8th note pickup, 3 4 3, like that. The crescendo obviously goes right to the last note. I could spend hours on this piece. I have spent hours on this piece. As you see, it's so much more complicated than we think, simply because of the fact that it's played so often. And often at rehearsals, I think when I did it with the Philharmonic, the program had the Hebrides Overture, Age of Anxiety, the premiere of the Chris Ross Trombone Concerto, and then this. So there wasn't a lot of time to put it with the Bernstein and the Rouse. The Rouse particularly was hard. And that happens a lot. This is one of those things you're going to show up, you might have one rehearsal with a good orchestra. So you have to make your decisions. Which battles do you want to fight? Certainly, swing versus straight, important. You got to straighten that out. But often you have to really rely on your gestures. What do you want to bring out? Try to get somebody's attention before they play. They'll know because they'll see you trying to communicate with them to have something brought out. Why is he looking at me? And then you do this, or whatever gesture you use to do it. This is really, I'm often surprised. If I was having a conducting competition, I would put this piece in it. I really would. It's so hard. The four pieces I usually do are Magic Flute, First Tableau Petrushka, Appalachian Spring, and Afternoon of a Faun, because those four pieces show strengths and weaknesses of pretty much every conductor. But I would like someday to add this piece. If I had an orchestra that was big enough for an audition to do it, I would just love to see how people approach, especially the first 5 minutes or so, to see what they do and if they communicate well or not. So it's a hard piece. You cannot take it for granted. I'll assume most of you haven't done it yet, but you will. And that's important. This is a piece you will do, and it is a piece you have to know. And it's a piece that you can show the orchestra a lot about your knowledge with this piece and with your gestures and with your face and with your body. If you happen to go to my website and look at, I haven't conducted now for a bunch of months. I took the summer off mostly, but now it starts. I have a lot of engagements. I'm in New York next week, Portland, Oregon, then 6 weeks in Europe, where American in Paris is on at least 2 of the programs, I think. And they're all, I'm happy because they're all good programs, the places I get to go. Even at this advanced age, I'm learning some things that I could pass along if you don't mind. These days, librarians and other administrators don't seem to have, this is generality, is quite as much knowledge as their predecessors. So I get asked questions which I never got asked before about. There's one, it's in Poland, Katowice. Months ago, I submitted the program and they wanted to do it. It has a suite that was arranged by Sir John Barbaroli based on Henry Purcell. And only last week, and this thing is in like 4 or 5 weeks, we can't find the music. How do we do that? And we've known about this program for months, and just now they're getting around to getting the music. And it shouldn't have been up to me, but no, I went in my library. I said, no, it's published by Oxford. Write to Oxford and London. If not, you look it up on Wikipedia or whatever you look at, or IMSLP. What do you see? Premieres by the New York Philharmonic. Maybe they can tell you. These kind of questions never came up before. They really do. They're very strange. So you might get a question in the Gershwin, which version do you want to do now? That never came up. It was always the one we're looking at. But I do get questions, do you want to do the Michigan version? Well, the only reason you really want to do it is if you want to make sure you get those taxi horns that come with the parts. Get the university. What are they going to do if it's 2 people doing this piece in the same week? Do they have 2 sets of identically pitched taxi horns? I don't think so. So we have to be practical in many cases. There's always stuff to learn. The more information you know in advance, the better it is. But I can tell you also, the more frustrated you will get. It becomes annoying after a while. It really does. But that's part of it, guys. You pick this profession. Good luck. Got any questions?
Maestro, that was fantastic. You've given us the Ferrari lesson, or shall I say, we might call it the Chrysler, fast Chrysler version of American in Paris.
Manual or stick shift.
There you go. I mean, I can tell you that having conducted this piece so often as well,
I'm
I mean,
sure.
the very fact that we are designated as American conductors, we're almost asked to do it quite often.
That's right.
But for everybody, it should be in their repertoire because it is such a showpiece, both for the orchestra and for the conductor. But one of the downsides is the fact that it is so often programmed in pops programs. And as a
That's right.
result, I'm not sure that people give the time necessary for this piece that it really requires, given the detail that you've just shared with us. And the second thing that I can say, which is so fascinating, which you've given us so much insight in your analysis and in your understanding of the historical origins of this piece, is, we don't know stylistically what actually happened in the time of Bach or Beethoven. What we do know is what happened stylistically in the time of Gershwin. And yet, despite all that, we still have so many questions to ask, and there are still many interpretive decisions about how this piece can be performed that is different from what's actually in the score. And you've pointed a lot of that out to us, and that is a really generous treasure for us to all carry with us as we take that to the podium and into our rehearsals. We are going to...
Go ahead. I can add one thing that's interesting. One of the only 2 engagements I did this summer was out in the Hollywood Bowl, and they wanted to have Rhapsody in Blue. I said, well, okay, but I have a pianist that I want for it. His name is Makoto Ozone. He's the leading Japanese, well, now he's Hiromi as well, but he's unbelievable jazz pianist who never studied classical music, but now he plays Ravel, Prokofiev, Mozart. He does all this. So what he does is he improvs. The cadenzas are now, they incorporate the Gershwin, but it's so great. And what's cool is that the orchestra, they were just riveted by what he was doing. But I did get people coming back afterwards saying, that's not the Rhapsody in Blue. It's not the one we know. And that is a problem. So when you make stylistic changes, you have to really be convinced that's the way you want to do it. And you have to say, we think Gershwin might have evolved with the times. Remember, he dies in 1936. So between the premiere of American in Paris, it's only 6 years, 7 years. So music is only evolving at the end of Gershwin's life into the swing style. Would he have embraced it? Probably. How do we know that? Because we can listen to his amanuensis, Oscar Levant, and hear what Levant does later on. I mean, Levant was the protege of Gershwin. So that's one way of telling. And the reason I'm telling you this is because even though I've said a couple places, well, this doesn't seem right, that's actually not a good answer. I can give you more elaborate, real musical reasons of why I would do something. And you have to be able to do that too. If you're going to make a change, you have to always be able to back it up with a musical reason other than I feel it that way.
Bingo. We do have some questions. Carolyn, why don't you unmute and share with us your questions? You had a few, actually, so why don't you share with us?
Thank you so much, and fantastically informative session. Thank you, Maestro. Nice to see you again. So,
you too.
Yeah, the question that I have, so I'm looking at figure 63 here. The saxes are marked bells in air. With respect, do you do that? Do you actually do that with respect to with the violins? And but
I don't have that indication in my score.
Oh, okay.
Which version? Just hold up your score. Let me see what it looks like. Yeah, so that's well, like maybe it's from this original. Let's see, 63. Let's see if that's there. I hadn't noticed that. But thank you for pointing it out. I don't know how when you're baritone sax you could hold your bell in the air, but
yeah,
no, it's not. It's not here.
Not in my score. Not in my score.
No, I think it's a misprint.
Okay, so it just
obviously usually only.
It just
Oh, it's on the run. Wait a minute. Slow down.
No, it's 60. On the downbeat. On the downbeat, above the tenor sax.
Yeah, I see it, but I don't have the bells in the air. No. Let me just do one more check. Hang on, I looked at the wrong number because I'm old and I can't read anymore. 63. No, you know what it is? In the original, the one I'm holding, this original, what it was is it was for them to change the instrument that they played. I don't know if I can get this to where you are. Oops. It says they all change to B flat soprano saxes.
Yeah.
So whoever printed that just put something else in, but it's that's to change the instrument, not to hold them in the air.
Yeah, but you could ask your saxophone players to stand up and give a little big
No,
band.
that's true too. That's true too. Yeah.
Okay, so
So,
yeah.
What else?
In that section there, you mentioned you didn't do the writ before that. Are you in 2 or 4 at this point at 63?
I'm going to be in 4 for the 2 bars before 63, up until then I'm in 2.
Okay, and then at 63,
I go into 4, 2 before 63. So I've been
Okay.
1, 2, bum, 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 bum. So the symphony and the people playing eighths it's clearer to be in 4, and you're setting up the tempo without the change. So 1, 2, 1, and then 2 before. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Da da ba 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 ba. I would do it whether I made a retard or not. I would go into 4, 2 before.
And just so I understand, then you stay in 4 right the way through
Oh
to
yeah.
where
Oh yeah. Yeah.
happens.
Stay in 4. It's too much going on. It almost feels lazy if you go da 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 da. For this section, which is more rock, it's like the traffic in New York. This is going on. All these automobiles at the time are honking at each other and stuff is going on. No, I think staying in 4 is probably the better solution. The 2 just it doesn't look like the music sounds at this point. That's important too. Often we have to have our beat convey how the music sounds. We are the physical embodiment of the sound. That's our job as conductors. We have to look like the music. That's why with Bernstein, you look at Bernstein videos, take the sound out, and you can see the music in his body. You always know what he's conducting and where he is. So I don't care about the people say, oh, it's so choreographed. No, he's doing what the music told him to do, and it's right for him.
Super. And you talked us through 2 and 3 before 65. Could you talk us through the tempo relationship, sort of going into the grandioso there, like particularly the 4/8 measure? Do you keep that
So
in
here's how it works. 64 in this section, you're just all in tempo. For me, 3 before 65, I start slowing down a little bit. So it's suddenly. So let's just do it as if it was the violins at 64. Da da ba ba da da ba 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 da ba 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 ba. So I do it subito meno mosso. So I exaggerate the rhythmic what's the word here? Anomaly between the wind rhythm and the string rhythm. I think if it goes too fast, 3 before 65, you don't really hear dum ba dum ba da against da ba ba ba. I think it's really important to hear those 2 rhythms going on. So suddenly a little bit slower. So da da ba 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 bum ba da 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 1 2 yum pam ba, like that. And sometimes I've done in the 4/8 bar or the 4/8 bar. Bum, da, dum, da, dum, 1 2 3, hold, ba. You can do it that way too. Just put a little fermata on the last note. But keep in mind that if you do that, the string notes still have dots on them. So I think if you slow down, probably the dots need to be changed to lines for those last 2 notes. Da, da, ba, 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 bum, ba, bum. Bum, bum, bum. So they feel like they're pickups to the phrase that's coming now. It would be interesting. Maybe I should try it if I have time with the orchestra next week. Try those notes short. No. The two pickup notes of 65 need to be long. They just.
I think the big question here for many people is that 4/8 and 2, or is the 4/8 and 4? And I think you've
it's
really
in 4. It's in 4.
confirmed for everybody.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to lose them. You're going to lose the middle note in the woodwinds if you stay in 2. It'll be buried. And because their line is going down and the other line is going up, you have to make sure that the woodwinds actually do a crescendo as they get to the lower register. Otherwise, you lose it entirely.
Great. And Carolyn, you did ask about the Italian song that Gershwin quotes. Can you give us the name of that again, Leonard? Is it La Sorella?
La Sorella.
Yeah, La Sorella.
Yeah.
And Leah,
Yeah.
Wendy, I think you you had a question, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. It was kind of a general question overall. You know, with rehearsal being so, you've got to be so focused and keep moving because there's a limited number of minutes. But is there a way to check? Do librarians typically have a sheet of errata for the orchestra and put those into their parts before your rehearsal? Or is that really on the conductor and you have to alert them to this?
You have asked a real sticking point question. I have been in touch with a few librarians. It came up while I was doing some of the writing for my book, where I know errata lists exist. For some pieces, Daphnis and Chloe has an errata list. Firebird Suite has one. But for a lot of repertoire, the librarians have it through their library association, but they're only allowed to share it with other librarians. That is stupid, because if the goal for the librarian is to make things so clear for us, why shouldn't the conductor have an errata list? Why shouldn't the publisher provide an errata list? So I implore all of you, really, there needs to be a concerted effort for conductors to get to these publishers and get us the information so we can save time and focus on the music at the rehearsal and not fixing wrong notes. But the answer is, you're exactly right. If you have a program and you should be in touch with the librarian and say, do you have an errata list so I can make sure my score matches your parts? That's the best way to phrase that, by the way. Because often, I mean, I've come to rehearsals and the parts don't match what I have. So now I try to make sure it's the same. Sometimes I have my own set of parts. Sometimes with rental pieces, publishers will have a Slatkin set if it's a piece I do a lot. Surprisingly, the Barber piano concerto has a set because I make some significant changes and then I have to spend time with the orchestra changing 5/8 to 5/4. You know, so, but indeed, librarian, next to the personnel manager, the librarian should be your best friends.
Indeed. Enrique, you have some questions. First of all, you wanted to ask about 2 to 3 before 68. Why is there this ossia of the bassoon with the tuba if it was originally a bass clarinet that played this?
No. What I'm saying is that on the recording, you see it, you're right. On the recording, it's a bass clarinet. Here, I assume the ossia is there because maybe there weren't that many tuba solos in the 1920s. Okay. Petrushka, I guess Ravel has done his pictures, but that was for a 6-valve tuba, different kind of tuba. So it's possible that the tubist at the first performance or whatever just wasn't capable of doing this, and they gave it as an option to another instrument. But bassoon is also, of course, an option as well. I guess, I wonder if Tchaikovsky would have thought of that option for the Sixth Symphony.
Right, with the bass clarinet and the bassoon.
Yes.
Although more bassoons are doing it these days. What about the transition to 50? You had made a comment, Enrique also has the question about the accelerando going into the a tempo at 50, but you had made the point of a rallentando with a diminuendo.
Yeah, I don't know. Have you ever heard anybody actually make the accelerando and do subito a tempo? I've never heard it.
I've never heard the subito a tempo, but what I have actually done before, and it sounded quite interesting, was to sustain the first violins in the forte as it's written without coming down to a piano or a pianissimo.
Yeah. But then you have to come down at 50 and it's not indicated.
Absolutely. So I
you got to come down anyway. So it's a question if you want it to be sudden or not. So yeah, I can see that. And then certainly it's an option because it is what it says.
Interesting. So Leanne, you've given us for the group, Leanne has said that there's a group known as the Major Orchestra Librarians Association, which librarians from around the world routinely upload and access errata. And in Australia, they do put the errata in the scores for the conductors and for the parts.
They do. But the point is that we don't, as conductors, have access to it unless we're doing it. You can't just write to the association and say, send it. No, there needs to be a little bit like look, one of your best resources now is IMSLP. You know that.
Absolutely.
And if you can't find a score there, you know what you do? You can't print it out, but you go to the New York Philharmonic Archive, and they have all these scores. Some have markings, some don't. We can find most of this repertoire somewhere. But what we
Absolutely.
need are the errata sheets. And for this piece, I wonder if it isn't worth sending a note off to Mark Clegg at the university. He's a nice guy, very scholarly. And if they actually would provide either perusal score or something that really outlines the major changes and the things. This guy, Frank Campbell Watson, he did a pretty good job. He really did, as he did in the Concerto in F. So there was a reason that Gershwin and others used him, because they knew what to do with an orchestra. Remember, Gershwin never studied orchestration, and it is Gershwin's, and it's quite remarkable for somebody that naive to be this good at it.
Absolutely.
So,
well, we have another question from Lorenzo.
Somebody else had a question. Yeah,
Lorenzo.
Yes,
Unmute,
please. Yes. So you were talking about portamentos sometimes, right? Statistically. When is that allowed? For example, is that only in smaller intervals or in bigger intervals? How does that?
Well, okay. First of all, we have to differentiate between portamento and glissando. So there's two differences. A portamento tends to be a longer slide. A glissando tends to be, like that, shorter. But all we have to do is go back to Gustav Mahler. And we see those indications. I think he's the first one, or among the first, to actually let us know when he really wants one. But the performance style of the time, and if you go back and listen to early Bruno Walter recordings and others, you're going to hear a lot of sliding around in the strings, mostly because that was the technique they used to get from one position to the other. That was the portamento. So say you had a C natural on the A string, and you had to get to a C an octave higher on the E string. If you put your third finger down, or fourth finger in this case, no, third finger, you would have to shift up and get it over to the C on the E string. You'd have to make a slide to do it. So you'd go up on the A, and then next door you'd be at the position with the C. So that's complicated. So, but your question is this: how tasteful should it be, or how vulgar should it be? Those two things. And so I think it's personal. And maybe one of the best stories I can tell you, it's short. I was doing the second Rachmaninoff Symphony with Chicago Symphony in Ravinia one year. Concertmaster was Frank Magid, fabulous guy. And I looked, now I know this because my grandfather's brother conducted the American premiere of the second Rachmaninoff Symphony. So, I have this piece running in my bones. And I looked over at the rehearsed violins and I said, here, could we please have a portamento? It's Rachmaninoff. Stylistically, it just made sense. I said, I'd like one here, but I said, I don't want a portamento in the Chrysler style. That means you would have to go back and listen to Fritz Kreisler, and then you'd hear this sort of more exaggerated slide. I said, I want a portamento more like Heifetz, which tended to be quicker to get to the note. And Sam, just without missing a beat, he said, if I could make a portamento like Heifetz, do you think I'd be sitting here? So that's so we define the two. I think when in Gershwin, we're probably using the word glissando a little more, but we can use the word portamento if we're doing between even two short notes, because it's slower. A portamento is slower and is longer than a glissando is. The one in Mahler that always, I never know what to do, is in the Sixth Symphony in the slow movement. There's one between an octave A, and it's a slow movement, it's an andante, and he's got the thing indicated to be the whole bar. And I think only Simon Rattle has done it, but he's actually got like that. I think he did it that way. I'm not sure. And it just doesn't sound right. It seems to me it's just a little one at the end, but we don't know. Mahler didn't because it was assumed that his time everybody would know what to do, but our time we don't know. So
Jonathan, excuse me, Leonard.
Yeah.
Go ahead and finish.
No, I'm done.
Jonathan, you had a question.
Yes, just very quickly. First of all, thank you so much. This has been a veritable gold mine. I appreciate how systematic you've gone through both of these scores last week and this week. Just a really quick question, since I think I heard you correctly, you mentioned these are coming out of your upcoming book. I'd love to know when that's going to be released.
And the first volume will be in March. This week, we learned the publishers didn't like the title I gave the book, so that's changing. The title of the series is going to be Scores to Settle. That's a little play on words. I thought it was perfect. It said everything we need to. Now it's a little more academic. I forget what they're calling it. But in March, Roman and Littlefield is the publisher. And there'll be one volume every 6 months. Each volume will have 8 pieces in it. The first volume is 20th century pieces. I won't remember all of them. But what did we do? We did Appalachian last week. That's in there. Shostakovich 5 is in there. La Mer is in there. Bartok Concerto for Orchestra is in there. This is there. The Barber Adagio is in there. That's surprisingly difficult. The Barber. It'd be really hard. And 2 more that I just off the top of my head can't remember. Second volume will be most romantic pieces, Scheherazade, Tchaik 6. I put Beethoven 3 in there because I want to get that out there. And then after that, it'll be a kind of mishmash. And then the fourth one will be probably shorter overtures, preludes, things like that. I mean, look, I'm not a young man. I don't know how many of these I can churn out, but I try to get them. And so far, everybody that's seen them, the chapters, thinks they're right. I have each one done by another conductor. And I say, please, let me know where I've made a mistake, something I've left out, something that we can make better. So they're quite thorough. Yes, there are things. I should now put in, any of you have an edition that says saxophones filed up. I should put that in. It's funny. But even within editions, you can see it. Same publisher, same time. Sometimes it happens, but it's in March.
Marvelous. Maestro, this is, as Jonathan said, a gold mine. This is a priceless treasure for all of us. As you know, these CMO Great Maestros series, we're going to be making these recordings available to those who have participated. And what you have shared with us is unforgettable. I'm going to take a lot of this information to the next time that I do conduct this piece, and I'll be tipping my hat and giving a bow in your honor when I do come to these moments.
Don't turn to the audience and say these things that you don't like. They're
no,
I
won't do that. Although I did rip you off when I did take that quote of yours about Copeland with the chord. Remember we talked about that.
That's different. That's different.
Maestro, I do have one last point to put out. When I think it was rehearsal number 25, you said you came to this wonderful Stravinskyan moment of the chords that are played. 43. At 43, that's it, at 43. What a marvelous moment in this music. As you say, it's Stravinsky, and it reminds me of this incredible story that must have somehow had an impact as he put this into the music, because if he was composing this piece in 1928, premiering it in 29, something like this, he was in Paris in 28. He was there even from 25, and he did meet Stravinsky. And the famous story is, when he met Stravinsky, he said, "Oh, it's George Gershwin. How much money did you make?" And he said, "Well, this is how much money you make." And he says, "Why do you want to study with me? I should study with you." So
I've heard that also about Ravel.
And so Gershwin probably said, "Okay, I'm going to give my little chapeau to Stravinsky with this little Stravinskyan moment." Maybe it's wishful thinking. Who knows what he actually intended?
If you look at it, you see it outright. It's the C major against F sharp major.
Right. It's quite fascinating. So who knows? Maybe he put that in there to say, "Okay, Igor, now you know why I get the big bucks."
That's fair. I'm going to use that one.
I love it. Okay. Maestro, thank you so much. And for all of you who have participated, don't forget, in November 24th, we have the great opera conductor, Frédéric Chaslin, who's going to be discussing Puccini. As we know, the centenary of Puccini is coming up in 2024.
Guess what? Ask him about portamentos. You
Excuse
cannot
me?
do Puccini without portamentos. Ask
You
him.
can't do Puccini without portamento. That's the quote. You can't do Puccini without portamento. Bravo, Leonard. Thank you all so much. And thank
Hope
you
to
all
see you
for
next season,
participating
everybody. And
tonight.
if you're in the neighborhood of any of my concerts, please feel free to come to rehearsals. I do not restrict anybody. You can come. You can maybe you can even sit on stage. Who knows? But I'd like to meet you in
Wonderful.
person. Take care.
Thank you all.
John,
See you soon.
bye bye. Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye.